This event is brought to you by Engineering News Record and sponsored by Kahua. Hi, I'm Scott Sells, publisher of ENR, and thank you for joining us. CMMC compliance is quickly becoming essential for federal contractors, especially those working with the Department of Defense. Today, industry leaders will share how they're building scalable, strategic compliance programs to protect revenue and stay competitive. Leading today's discussion, we'll hear from Nicholas Johnson, Chief Evangelist at Kahua. Nicholas brings over 40 years of experience in the design and construction industry, and he began as an electrical designer before transitioning into IT and construction tech, holding leadership roles at Constructware, Autodesk, Trimble, and Beck Technology. Now, we'll be taking your questions at the end that come through the webinar, so don't forget to submit them in the Q&A section of the webinar console. And now I'll pass it over to Nicholas Johnson to kick us off. Nicholas?
Thank you, Scott. Always great to be part of an ENR presentation. For decades, ENR has been the go-to for our industry to find information, and we're proud to be part of this conversation today. We're especially proud because of the topic. It's so important, and Kahua, was the first project management application to receive FedRAMP authorization. And that's evidence that we take this topic seriously. As leaders in our space, we feel a responsibility to help educate the market on the importance of keeping our project and asset information secure. So thanks to everybody for joining us today. And again, thank you, Scott and ENR, for inviting us to share today. Let's get started with some introductions. I'd like to welcome to the presentation Lee Powers. Lee is the president and founder of Avcor Construction. Ashley Lex is a client success manager in the security and compliance services group at Security Bricks, powered by Aprio. Nate Mansfield is a solutions architect for K2 Consulting, and Chris Swartz is a senior manager at Quanta Government Solutions. Welcome, everybody. We're very glad to have you with us today. Lee, let me start with you and just simply ask for you to give a further introduction of yourself personally and of Avcor. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about the company and the work you do.
So I'm Lee Powers, president of Avcor Construction, and Avcor is a general contractor located here in Arkansas. Our primary customer is the federal government, and we specialize in healthcare and laboratory renovations, as well as other full-scale building interior and building envelope renovations for our federal customers, including the DoD, FDA, Department of Veterans Affairs, and a few other agencies. My husband and I both were in the service, and so after leaving the Air Force, we decided to continue serving in this manner, and so CMMC and is very important, I think, to continuing in this environment for sure.
Excellent. Thanks, Lee. And again, thanks for being with us. Ashley.
My name is Ashley. I'm the client success manager on the federal certification sales team at Aprio. So we at Aprio are actually both a CMMC C3PAO as well as a FedRAMP 3PAO. That's that third-party assessor organization. We support companies of all sizes at every stage of their compliance journey. We start all the way at the very beginning phases of readiness, in between with remediation, all the way to the formal audit. And in addition to those advisory and audit services, we actually also provide a set of automation tools that we've created both in Microsoft Azure and ServiceNow.
Excellent. Nate?
Hello, Nate Mansfield. I am a solutions architect with K2. We do a lot of schedule, controls, process work, as well as implementing and creating technology projects for a wide range of industries, including PMIS products like Kahua. We'll also help with getting you ready for CMMC certification. This is a area that we have deep experience with, having gone through and owning all of the controls for over 1,000 of the process controls for FedRAMP. We've been working through the NIST 800 controls for quite a while now. A very deep experience helping customers with that.
And Nate and I have been working together on and off for many years. He was part of that Constructware team that Scott mentioned I was part of in the 90s and early 2000s. So again, welcome, Nate. Glad you're with us. And finally, Chris Schwartz.
Where this hair color came from.
Chris?
Hey, thank you, Nicholas. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to participate today. So I've been with Quanta Corporate for about 10 years. I first learned about CMMC in late 2024. So Quanta Corporate's focused on mostly commercial work, right? Little pockets of government work. So we've elected to open up a new operating company focused on targeting government work. So I joined the team at the beginning of this year. It's been a crash course in learning about this. So happy to lend whatever advice I can here.
Well, again, Chris, thanks for being with us. So let me ask you all just a little more personal question. We'll go through in the same order. Who's your favorite team? Lee?
Football.
You pick the sport. You any kind of team. It could be the team that works for you.
We're going to go with that. I'm not a big sports fan.
Okay. Ashley.
Ditto. Yeah, I love my team. We're the best team. My favorite.
Nate.
Because I love them and you love them too, Nicholas, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets.
Excellent. Chris?
No, our baseball Tigers did a pretty good job this year. We'll see how the football Tigers do this fall.
Now you'll have to tell us which Tigers that are if people can't see the football on the back of your shelf there.
The LSU Tigers.
All right, go Dogs. Let's jump right in. All right, before we begin, actually, I've got some questions for each of you. But before we begin, we do have a couple poll questions. So I'm going to bring the first poll question up. And it's simply this. We'd ask our audience if you could answer this, give us a reply. Where are you in your CMMC journey? So are you just at the beginning, getting started? Are you right in the middle of it? Let us know. Answer one of these options that we have here, and let's just get a gauge for where our audience is. We can watch that fill out. Okay, lots of folks gathering facts. Could go back and show the questions themselves. Panelists, any comment, any expectation? Where do you think that the market would be? Any of this surprise anyone?
No, I think these results line up right with what we observed.
Yeah.
Okay. So no surprise that almost everyone is just getting started with this or even before they're started. So, all right, let's move on to the next poll question. And that is, who needs CMMC? Several options there. Do you think it's only the largest contractors doing the largest DoD projects? Do you think you need CMMC? What's our audience take on this? Panelists, observations from these answers?
Pretty good.
It's good that the market seems to understand that everyone's going to need, well, anyone that touches CUI is going to need certification.
It's important. Yeah.
All right. We'll let that run, and we'll jump right in with some questions. Ashley, if it's okay, I'm going to start with you. Aprio provides the consulting services and auditing services for companies that need CMMC. Will you get us started just by giving us a baseline? Tell us a little bit more about CMMC and who it applies to.
Yeah, I mean, based on that poll question, I'm glad everybody kind of has a good idea and understanding. So it's in a nutshell. So CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. It's a program designed by the DoD, so this is it's only for DoD contractors, but the caveat to that is the flow down from there. So it's anybody that works for the DoD who will store, process, or transmit the DoD's sensitive government information, which is specifically CUI, controlled unclassified information, or FCI, just federal contract information. And all of that's with the goal to strengthen our national security, to make sure that your cybersecurity controls are implemented appropriately. So if you're touching CUI, in particular, that's what they're mostly concerned about, or any of your subcontractors or suppliers are touching that as well. They also have your requirements for CMMC will also flow down to them as well. So the answer was that big long one, all of the people.
All right, excellent. So Lee and Chris, you are the contracting community that's being required to adopt these standards. Share where you are, actually, I want to ask you to share your experience about learning about CMMC. If you recall the first time, and Chris, you said you've come on board and this is all very new to you for Quanta. Lee, you can share when you first heard about CMMC and realized, wow, this is a really big deal. And it's a very important thing. I better get in this process. What was that like, and where are you in your journey now? And Lee, I'll start with you, and Chris, come back to you.
Sure. So, we started first hearing about CMMC, the certification requirement, several years ago at conferences, industry days, through email push outs from training, through Apex at the time, now it's PTAC, through the SBA, just through industry, and knew that it was going to be critical to start planning for that. Although these cybersecurity requirements were already there and in place, this is just a method to make us as contractors show our work, essentially. That's how I see it. So we started investigating, doing our research and our legwork, because at the time the CMMC framework wasn't set. So we didn't really know what we had to do to get across the finish line 3 years ago. We just knew we had to start getting prepared. So that's what we did, is we continued to do research. We continued to go to the training sessions when we would be at conferences and events and just learn as much as we could. And honestly, that's how we came to know Kahua, because we knew we needed a system when we were looking for a project management system. We knew we needed something that was going to be FedRAMP authorized, because we didn't want to spend money and funds to get into a system that wasn't FedRAMP authorized. So where are we in the process? We've done our boundary scoping, and so now we're in the process, or about to be in the process of implementing the remediation, I think is, Ashley will have to correct me on the terminology of that, because we're all learning it, and it's a different world than I live in on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. So that's the process that we're in, right? Is establishing the next
step. Lee, you said something very interesting, that you feel that these requirements have always been there in your contracts. Now you have to certify that you are following those guidelines and those requirements in a way that you didn't have to certify that before. Your contract said it, but nobody really, it seems nobody was really checking that, or there was no way to enforce that requirement. Is that how you feel? Did I interpret that correctly?
Some. Yeah. So the requirements they've been out there. What is it? NIST 800-171. Is that right? The right numbers? Yeah. So they've been out there, just whether or not they've been in certain contracts. Now, they haven't been in my contracts in the past, because I haven't handled what they classified as CUI in some of those. But I know that
they may have been in a contract, and there was no CMMC certification. So
correct. It was the self-assessment, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, hey, look, how many they're just government's just making sure that we're not pencil whipping our paperwork and our self-assessments.
Yep.
And it's
All right,
all in the
Chris.
interest of national security.
Chris, speak for Quanta. How did
Sure.
Quanta come to the decision that, hey, holy cow, this is a big deal. We better get on it.
Yeah, so while I mentioned CMMC is kind of new to me personally, it's not exactly new to Quanta. So Quanta corporate systems are ISO and SOC and all the other things as well, but slightly short of NIST 800-171, all of the controls there. Percentage of work and data that is federal work versus commercial work for Quanta is, minute at this point. So enterprise-wide, we've got a pretty secure network, but for the federal work, we've elected to take kind of an enclave approach. Due to the extensive regulations and our limited internal experience with this, we partnered with a third-party external service provider that's basically providing kind of compliance as a service. So specifically where we are with our operating units that are doing federal work, we're all up and running on, we report 110 SPURS score. So we're out of that POAM phase. I think that's what you were searching for there, Lee, the plan of action and milestones. We're beyond that. We're in our continuous monitoring phase, and we're actively interviewing for C3PAOs, targeting a CMMC audit for at least Quanta Government Solutions as the first entity to go late Q4 of this year. So we're kind of leading the charge, but we've got multiple enclaves that need to kind of fall in line here. So we're well on our way.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on the progress. Nate, I'm going to turn to you. The construction organizations need project management systems to automate and govern their business processes. Lee referred to it, when she was seeking out a solution, she wanted one that was FedRAMP. Owners of construction like to call those PMIS or project management information systems. Contractors often refer to them as CPM, construction program management. But our premise is if you use one of these solutions that is FedRAMP authorized, if you use that for project management, you will greatly reduce the scope of the CMMC effort. You've deployed these systems, and K2 offers the CMMC consulting. So what's your take on our premise that FedRAMP can reduce or shortcut the CMMC process, kind of reduce the scope of it? And perhaps first you could tell us a little bit about the deployment you did for a DoD agency. I don't know how much you can tell us about the agency or the work itself, but whatever you can. I know you've done this for a large DoD contract, and what can you tell us about that? And what is your take on FedRAMP for CMMC?
Okay. So just to get straight to the answer, it can help significantly because a fairly large portion of the controls that you have to demonstrate your abilities to meet, the infrastructure of Kahua in its FedRAMP environment help you achieve that, right? Kind of the way this is set up, I'm going to try to answer a question I saw here in the Q&A is this applies to anyone in what we've been calling the DIB, which is the Defense Industrial Base. And if you go way back and you just kind of look it up, it's because we saw pictures of a copy of the F-35 show up on Chinese media. And this got out through a uncontrolled breach. They were in a vendor of a vendor of a vendor. Duplicated billions of dollars, trillions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer intellectual knowledge, right? So what they defined was, okay, we need to have this infrastructure that says we are not only going to have computer infrastructure, network infrastructure that secures this information, but as organizations, we can competently manage this information and its access to it. That is defined by a set of controls. There's actually a bunch of things that do this, but what Lee referred to is NIST. I think it's the National Institute of Standards and Technology or something like that. They have a set of controls. It's over 1,000 that says here's everything that you need to do. And that is broadly what you could consider FedRAMP. FedRAMP is an infrastructure, a technology infrastructure that meets all of those controls. We did that in an agency for the Department of Homeland Security. We pretty much had to meet all 1,000 of those. So it's quite a bit more than what you have to do with CMMC too. But yeah, it was a big process that you have to go through. There are chief information security officers that you have to interface with, and you have to prove to them that you have everything locked down, tightened up. All your people know the right procedures. All your technology systems are in place. It gets very, very detailed with how you can prove that you're doing all those things. On CMMC 2.0, there are 110 controls. Kahua helps with about 60 of those. So when you're going through this audit and figuring out where you are in meeting these controls, you're going to have to say, well, what's my email system? What's any softwares that we touch? What are our door locks like? Do I have a system to patch my computers regularly? All these things. And a lot of those will start to touch on how you handle not only the storage, but the flow and communication of CUI, controlled unclassified information for the federal government. Kahua has the infrastructure to handle a lot of those, about half of it. So you don't just get checkbox say, hey, I did it, but I have the infrastructure and the tooling in place to meet a lot of those.
Excellent. Ashley, would you have a similar business. Would you add or change anything to that answer? And I know you can't speak to Nate's project, but to the conversation about FedRAMP as an assistant for CMMC.
Yeah, I mean, if using a FedRAMP authorized solution like Kahua, where you can actually, on the CMMC side, where you can safely store your CUI, that will greatly reduce your boundary because FedRAMP solutions just in general will allow you to shift that responsibility to the service provider. So it reduces the number of controls that you're actually responsible for. So definitely lightens the load.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for that. But let me ask you each for a bit of clarity on FedRAMP. There's a lot of talk from vendors about being FedRAMP compliant without offering a FedRAMP solution. So an example of this is a contractor that talks of setting up an enclave using a non-FedRAMP solution on a government cloud, a FedRAMP approved facility. So perhaps they're on GovCloud, but they're using a non-FedRAMP authorized software. That doesn't smell right to me. Will you comment on that?
I'll take a stab at that. Yeah, I mean, if you're using a non-FedRAMP compliant service and it's storing, processing, or transmitting CUI, let's say that they're a cloud service provider, a SaaS provider, they're not FedRAMP authorized, and they're touching your CUI. That's not good. That's very, very bad. And I would say, their intent to become FedRAMP authorized it doesn't equal compliance. As a general just rule of thumb, they have to be FedRAMP authorized if they're touching your CUI, period. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
It can't be pending, can't be in progress. You can't simply put it in a GovCloud and call it compliant.
Right. No, intention does not equal compliance.
Nate, would you add anything to that?
No, I think that was perfect. I also think that you need to recognize that as an organization, you're going to be attesting to the fact that you meet all of these controls and you've done everything that you need to do. You're not granted like this blanket form of hey, great, you're certified, you can do whatever you want. You are, as an organization and as an officer, attesting to the fact that we have everything under control. We've been audited to demonstrate we have everything under control, but that's for our comfort, knowing that we're not actually accidentally going to be one of these people that let something out into the wild that should not have been.
All right, a final question on that then. If the audience is using a non-FedRAMP vendor, and the vendor tells them that they intend to get FedRAMP authorization, what's your advice on using that vendor? And what does it mean to be in progress on the FedRAMP marketplace? Nate, I'll start with you.
I'm gonna parrot what Ashley said. Is you need to be looking at FedRAMP authorized. I would not kind of bother with going down any other routes. I'm sure there's a lot of really, really good reasons, but even if they have some sort of a path forward, the process is long and uncertain and fraught, and there is no guarantee that in a timely manner that aligns with what you need, they're going to have their authorization. on top of that, it's like FedRAMP-authorized is where you need to be.
Ashley, anything else?
Yeah, just to echo, it's really that timeline. If they say they're pending in progress, yeah, like Nate, it's fraught with all of these you can't guarantee that they're not going to hit a road bump and it's going to kick them down the road a few more months. And maybe you have something, you're trying to get your organization actually CMMC certified, next month. And they're saying, well, don't worry, we'll also be FedRAMP equivalent by next month. You're putting a lot of eggs in that basket. It's really just not worth it.
Chris and Lee, you guys are the purchasers, the procurers of these systems. What would you advise? And you, by the way, have, as you both just said, you've both recently acquired a FedRAMP authorized project management solution. What would you advise your peers if they were looking? Perhaps they used another tool, they want to keep using it, and that tool says, we'll be there. What would you advise them?
I'll go first. Yeah, ditto to what Nate and Alex said. It's pretty black and white as far as I'm aware. You're either authorized or you're not, and that is not a path I would want to go down. It's too much risk, long and uncertain authorization process. From my perspective, practically you'd have to default back to just running whatever the software is on premise in your own enclave or what have you. But now you're not inheriting any controls, so you become the primary responsible party for how do you produce this evidence? How do you ensure that who has access to it and, ingress, egress, logs, the whole thing, which, maybe the juice is worth the squeeze, but from what I've seen, that's not the case.
Lee, any thoughts?
If you want to do business with the federal government, specifically with the DoD, then do you want to bank on another company getting to that position of FedRAMP authorized within a certain time frame? I know of companies who this is what they do every day, and they've come home defeated from their audit result, the day when they receive their audit results. So we were not willing to do that. We're not intending to add to our tech stack unless it is CMMC compliant, or there's a workaround, or we have protocols in place that system is not ever intended to touch CUI. That's just our position going forward. Because I, for one, believe that CMMC should go to other agencies besides the DoD. And I think it's going to come. And I think that we will be ready when it does happen. And I think those companies that have made the forethought to become compliant and to protect your company, not just protect our data that the federal government is entrusting us to hold for them in order to build our government infrastructure. But this is the path forward of the future. And our adversaries are on a daily basis trying to infiltrate our systems to access the information that we as contractors and our subcontractors are holding. So I would say run from it if they're not FedRAMP authorized and you want to do business with the DoD.
All right. Thank you all for that. I really appreciate it. And I want to now just kind of get down to brass tacks. So Ashley, I'm going to come back to you. You're the consultant. What should the process be like for someone like Avcor Construction or Quanta Government Solutions when they determine that they should pursue CMMC certification? How do you get started, and what does it look like then?
Yeah, I mean, my first recommendation, honestly, if you're just at the very beginning and you're just trying to kind of understand and get your head wrapped around it, I think the most important thing is to actually familiarize yourself with CMMC. Use the free resources available online on the DoD CIO's website. Get a good grasp of the policy, that 32 CFR 170, and then NIST 800-171A Rev 2. Those are going to be your biggest, that's your roadmap, right? That's literally what you need to know. I would suggest, though, like one person in your company, just assign them, say, hey, go read these things, learn about it, tell us what we need to do. Aside from that, I think finding a good readiness partner is actually crucial. If you are blessed in your firm, if you have a strong, solid IT team, they have a good grasp on the frameworks, and you want to, go at it yourself, great. But I, at some point, engage with some sort of a C3PAO or even an RPO to give you a mock assessment. But if you're doing it yourself and you're trying to just take a stab at the first step should be figure out what level you're at, depending on which type of data you're handling. If it's FCI, only and no CUI, you're just level 1, that's easy. Level 2 is where most people will fall who touch the CUI, and that's where CMMC is really relevant. Define your boundary is huge. That's your whole foundation, and then you're going to build all of your documents, policies, procedures after that. And then, at some point, definitely try to get a gap analysis or some sort of just a high level mock assessment just to make sure that you're on the right track if you're doing it yourself.
All right. So what I heard, the thing that I heard that jumps out at me is if you don't have a really strong IT team, find a consultant to help with you. And I say that knowing that we have 2 consultants on the call today, so they'll be glad to take calls after this. Lee, let me ask you, how does that line up with your experience? And Chris, I'm going to ask you the same question next. So Lee, does that sound like a reasonable approach that Ashley has laid out for us?
Absolutely. I mean, as a small business, we don't have an in-house IT team. So for us to attempt to do that on our own would be catastrophic, and we would spend a lot of money to get nowhere.
Kahua's a mid-sized company. We would not endeavor to go through these processes without hiring people like Ashley that live and breathe this every day. So we've determined when we went through our FedRAMP process, we needed an agency to help us with that, a consultant to help us with that as well. Chris, what's your experience there?
Yeah, obviously Quanta's got plenty of resources, but we like to use our tools effectively as well. So we'll hire the experts. We've not been through it before. It's new for everyone. I mean, CMMC certification really just started rolling out a couple months ago. So too much risk involved. It's a big differentiator for us. It's getting us in the room and some conversations we wouldn't otherwise be in. So pretty easy decision to bring in the experts, do it right the first time, not risk some sort of long extended implementation. So yeah, it was a no-brainer for us to bring in outsiders to help get it over the goal line.
It's a good point, Chris. What you are really good at is building things. I mean, that's the core competency of your business, right? So
sure. That
makes sense to me that, do what you're really good at and bring in other folks to help you at the things that you don't specialize in. Chris, I'll come back to you. Are there any hurdles or roadblocks that you found so far in your journey that you wished you could have avoided, that you'd like other people to know about?
When you're dealing with these secure environments, there are some technology limitations. It doesn't always work like you would think a commercial product might work. Things are just restricted, especially when integrating with other environments and collaborating. Mm-hmm. And I would say those technology limitations are pretty easy for IT folks to grasp, but not necessarily the business folks. So with that, leave yourself some time to work with the business and develop those true requirements. And it's a lot of conversations about desirement versus requirement. There's a lot of stuff the business would like to do that would make their life easier, but they're kind of restricted from it. So that's one thing that is kind of stood out to me. Quanta Government Solutions is a new opco stood up from the ground. So some of those core processes around change management and things of that nature, we're still maturing. So that's been an additional challenge. If you're a small business with not a lot of base processes, that's another heavy lift you have to put on top of this because not everything can be outsourced. So while we've got Kahua as a cloud service provider, and we've got another organization acting as an external service provider that provides us compliancy as a service, you can't outsource everything. So if you look at that all 110 controls. You can inherit, partially inherit, or then you just own them down at the operating unit level. There's still several that can't be outsourced. So it's good to have good partners that allow you to focus on the things that can't be outsourced. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Lee, you said you were still early in the journey, but have you found roadblocks so far that you wished you had avoided, or that you, again, advise your peers to avoid?
I don't know that I would say that they are necessarily roadblocks or hurdles, because we've been following the process very slowly and constantly trying to find the right path for our company and the right fit. So I can't say that they're hurdles, because we are finding the right partners as we go, and we are waiting. Well, we did wait. We didn't jump on board with the first person that we talked to about something, a year or two ago. We talked with different companies. We tried out different project management softwares, but we found the right fit that had the the FedRAMP authorization already in place. So I can't say they're hurdles. I would just say do your homework. Make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row. Don't try to do it cheap. And if your company is not quite ready to jump into this DoD market, then don't do it.
Excellent.
Don't spend money don't spend money to do it on the cheap, because you're going to end up spending more money to fix it.
Yeah. Nate and Ashley, I'll turn to you. You have a different perspective on this. How would you answer that question? What traps would you want to help your customers avoid? Nate, we'll come to you first.
I think the way Lee said it was pretty good, in that there would certainly be hurdles for most organizations that don't have a very mature, highly competent IT function. And I think just the lack of realizing, oh my gosh, like I have to create this very detailed, very in-depth SSP that's going to outline how we're going to handle everything. I've got these controls that I don't fully understand. So just the ability to kind of realize the totality of how maybe altering to your everyday operations that this is going to be, and then being able to turn those things from, maybe difficult or insurmountable hurdles into, actionable things that we can have somebody help us with as a qualified expert.
Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, to add to all of that, really, I love what Lee said. I talk to OSCs, organizations seeking assessment, daily, and something that I hear often actually is, well, we were partnering with this one company, they did X, Y, and Z. Well, it didn't work out, or this, and this happened. Long story short, here I am now talking to you guys. Please help fix it. So it really is finding the right partner, making sure that you know what you actually need. So you do need some, base level knowledge of what your organization is actually going to do on a daily basis. You're the ones that have to live and breathe with this afterwards. So getting your whole team aligned. It's not just an IT project. It touches everything and everyone. So everybody has to be aligned on it. And then just some practical tips, some things that we see along the way. A lot of people don't quite understand the documentation requirements. And that's also just something great if you can find somebody to partner with that really understands the intent of the controls. Like, what is this control actually asking me to do? And just making sure that it's documented right and that you can prove that you're doing it. All of those things, the right people can help steer you in the right direction, and make sure you don't over-engineer your system, your boundary, just making sure it's clean, concise, simple, and usable. That's, I think, what's most important.
So perhaps it's a bit like when Lee would determine she needed to joint venture with somebody. That's a conversation. That's a partnership you're creating. You better get that right up front, or it's going to be really hard for you to get across the finish line. Great advice.
Make sure you know what you want.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, this is a good time to go to our final poll question. Fits right in. What's your biggest concern about CMMC? The possibility of not gaining accreditation and losing business opportunities, the cost or potential cost and the time that it takes to complete it, all the unknowns about CMMC and trying to roll that out. Perhaps you're not concerned at all because you've already received your certification, or perhaps you're not concerned at all because you think this is all going to go away.
Nicholas, while that's being answered, do you mind if I add on to the previous discussion just a little bit?
Oh, by all means, please.
So Lee brought up another really good point about, hey, is this something we really want to get into? And if you think about our industry and how collaborative it is and how many partnerships we need to make with subcontractors and vendors and that entire ecosystem, we'll go back to I think it was the first poll question. Who needs to be worried about the handling of CUI data? And it's every one of them. And so if you put yourself in the position of a general contractor that needs to hire subs that have widely varying maturity around cybersecurity, you need to be thinking about that because you own that problem now. And so I think that's another kind of like thing to think about when you're trying to get into this, that maybe a lot of organizations don't think about up front, is how fundamentally disruptive it can be to their operations.
That's great point, Nate. Thank you for adding that. So our responses tell us that people are most concerned about what they don't know about CMMC. So I hope that today will be helpful to folks. As a kind of a side note, there is collateral information in the handouts tab. Feel free to go there. We've put some things that might be helpful to those that are beginning this journey. I'm going to come back to the topic though, and we've talked about what CMMC is and what best practices look like and what pitfalls we want to avoid. Can we take a minute and talk about the business case? So first of all, I'll come to our consulting arm here. What should we expect this to cost and how much time will it take? And then secondly, I'm going to turn to our two construction experts, our two contractors, and ask, what do you see the benefits are? Why are you going through this process? So let me give the first question to Ashley and Nate. Ashley, we'll start with you. What's it going to cost and how long is it going to take?
I love this question.
I knew you would.
And I hate to answer that it depends. The range is just enormous. I mean, we can see people get ready for, as quickly as just a couple of months. I want to say all in, start to finish, you really are probably looking at somewhere around like $100K to get ready and go get certified. But you could just ad hoc little pieces here and there and find a firm that can do some time and materials. You could spend $5,000, $10,000. It might take you a little bit longer, 6, 7, 8 months. Especially if you want to try and do it on your own. Again, like if you do that, definitely try to get a mock assessment or gap analysis at some point from a professional, C3PAO or CCA. That could be as little as like 15,000, 20,000. But it's important to get the double checks in, and spend the money. I mean, you're investing all of this time and energy. You don't want to waste more money. So cutting corners and finding cheap ways to get around things really ends up costing you a little bit more, in the long run, not just monetarily. It's dangerous. Yeah.
Well, if everyone's situation's a little different, do you have a conversation, do firms like Aprio and K2, do you have conversations to help people understand what their process would look like?
Sure. So since every situation is different, right? We like to find out, well, starting what do you know already? So which kind of lends into, where are you at in your process? What is your timeline? Let's talk about your team. How realistic is it? What the lift will end up looking like. And then ultimately it becomes, how big is your boundary? What is your scope going to look like? The size of your scope will dictate how much money you're going to end up spending. If you have 3 people that are touching CUI in your company, you're all cloud-based, it's going to be relatively inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. But, if you're a 200-person organization and you want every single person in your whole organization in that scope, that's going to be a huge lift, time and money. So that's kind of the two spectrums there.
Yeah. So Nate, as I said before, I know this is a bit of an unfair question because there's so many unknowns, but I also know people jump on the elevator and ask you, hey, how much is it going to cost and how long will it take? So how would you answer that question, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing that Ashley was getting at is, doing some sort of an assessment to see kind of where you're at, right? And then there are things in there that you as an organization or a technology partner can handle for you, or that you can do yourself. And then other parts of it, it's going to be a lot more expeditious and ultimately cheaper in the long run to have an outside organization help you with that. I would say to kind of get started with some sort of a good gap analysis, you are probably in the $20,000, $25,000 range to get you kind of your arms around the problem and see where you're at. And then, the unfortunate answer is it just goes up from there. I'm pretty comfortable in saying it's probably a 6-figure sort of engagement to really kind of get through it speedily and effectively as possible. That's the best answer I can give. Is it's get everything in front of you, hire somebody who knows what they're doing to do some sort of an assessment on you, see where you're at, what you're going to have to do, what you're positioned to reasonably handle, and what makes sense for them. As far as a timeline, I guess in theory you could go pretty dang fast if you're highly capable and got the manpower to throw at it. But you're still in the many months. I would say 9 months plus is probably a more reasonable estimate. And again, some of that would be just the amount of energy that you can throw at it to kind of get everything documented, and it's just awful lot of work.
A lot like a software deployment that people could invest their full time to do it, but the people already had a full-time job when this initiative came into the company.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. That's good. That's great advice. Thank you both. I know that's a difficult question, but I also know it's one that's on the mind of a lot of folks in our audience. So I'm going to now turn Lee and Chris. Chris, this is costly and it takes a long time. Why do you do it? What's the business case for it?
I guess the obvious one is if it's a requirement to receive a contract, you want to get that contract. More practically speaking, though, right? If you're in a prime position and third-party attestation removes a lot of risk around the older self-attestation of are your subs really doing what they say they're going to do. So I think you're reducing your exposure greatly there, and you can flip that right around on its head. If you're a sub and you want to work for a prime, you're locked out without this, right? So it's kind of a non-negotiable. More broadly speaking, though, each revision of these NIST controls get more specific with the requirements and further defining the controls. So the more organizations that are following these good hygiene practices, the better we all are. The rising tide raises all ships. So, it's important stuff, as you mentioned earlier. It's not, identity theft is a problem. I don't want mine stolen, but this is beyond that as well, right? With defense information and nuclear and those types of things. So, great benefit to the standardization, I believe.
Lee, what would you add to that?
Well, I would echo if it's a requirement and you want to do business with the DoD, you have to become compliant. But also, if you're going to continue to do business with the federal government in the future, there's already other agencies that are talking about CMMC-like requirements being extended to those agencies. And there are other agencies where we have more difficulty getting people on their installations, on their facilities, than we do on our Air Force Base here in Arkansas because of the nature of the work that they do there. And it's not a DoD agency. So we're getting ahead of the game and we're protecting ourselves in the process. And we also have commercial customers who are deriving benefits from these extra security protocols and that we are putting in place because their information is now protected in a way that it wouldn't be if they chose a commercial contractor who wasn't required to have these extra cybersecurity protocols in place.
That's a great point. What you do for your most stringent customers benefits all your customers in this area. And you raise a good point as well, that we saw FedRAMP proliferate from FedRAMP to GovRAMP, and now state and local agencies are using it. So security standards tend to proliferate because they are a good idea. We've seen CMMC now rolled out officially beginning December 16th of 24, and it will continue to roll out in phases. In January, I believe it was, 3 other agencies, NASA, if I recall, and Ashley, Nate, perhaps you could correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was NASA, the GSA, and the Army Corps of Engineers. But there were 3 other agencies that proposed that CMMC requirements be extended to all federal agencies. And I know that proposal had a 90-day hearing period where people could comment. I don't know what's happened since then. Do either of you have a pulse on that, on the idea of proliferating CMMC to other government agencies? And in no particular order.
Nate, do you have a thought?
So I don't have a definitive answer on the agencies that are doing it, but that it is proliferating throughout the federal government. Even just kind of like a poor answer is the Department of Defense has quite a lot more political power now than maybe in the past and around this particular topic, and it's just spilling outwards from there. And as I think Lee had pointed out, there are adversaries out there that are probing other sensitive parts of U.S. infrastructure beyond the DoD. And so there's already a standard in place that these other organizations can adopt. That's the way to go rather than create their own.
Yeah, and my pulse on it really is just that I would not be surprised if you would see that happening, and the proliferation happening. But the DoD has to figure out first how CMMC is actually going to get implemented, what that's going to end up looking like, maybe work through some kinks here. And then I think once they've got a solid, semi-formal process that's usable, doable, easy to implement, I can see it picking up really quickly with other parts of the federal government.
So this would be not just defense industrial base, but any federal work could eventually have this requirement or something very similar. And then if that happens, I would assume we would begin to see it in states and local agencies as well. So again, it's just good hygiene. We ought to all be practicing these things anyway. Okay, I'm going to move on. What you've heard today about preparing for CMMC certification, for that assessment, that it might all seem overwhelming. The thought of working across multiple spreadsheets and documents, managing deadlines over the course of 6 to 18 months without a tool to keep things organized is not appealing. That's why Kahua has created a CMMC Readiness app to bring together everything into a single workspace built specifically for general contractors and subcontractors working within the Department of Defense. Kahua's CMMC Readiness app is available at no cost. There are some restrictions, so reach out to your Kahua representative or visit us at www.kahua.com/CMMC-readiness-app. So let's take a look. We've got a little demonstration for you. Through the CMMC Readiness app, you can self-assess your progress against controls and objectives ahead of your certification assessment. You can additionally set your own deadlines for specific controls, which you will see under the due date tracker. Within the controls table, you'll find each control family for level 2 certification and dive in to understand the controls your organization needs to meet. You can select specific controls, look at the details for that control, manage the controls with options to set a status, a designation, a due date, as well as assign the control to anyone you've invited to collaborate with you within the app. Additionally, for each control, you'll find the assessment objectives that you're required to meet, and you'll have the ability to upload documentation as evidence. That showcases to your assessor that your organization is meeting those assessment objectives. And once you've uploaded the evidence, you'll see that evidence linked underneath the assessment objectives you selected, and you can update the status for that objective. As you save your selections, you will find controls with upcoming due dates in the due date tracker section. Kahua's FedRAMP-authorized platform assists with 60% of the controls for CMMC Level 2 certification and provides documentation on how these controls are met, thereby providing a tremendous head start in receiving and maintaining your CMMC certification as you continue your work with the DoD. So again, the Readiness app is available at no cost. Reach out to your Kahua rep if you're interested, or visit us at kahua.com/CMMC Readiness /CMMC-Readiness-app. And I want to point out again, there are some materials that we'll share in the handouts area. So it's at this point we get to go to Q&A. We're going to look in our Q&A section, see if we have any questions ready for us. Okay, I have a question here. What happens if the information I have sent to me is clearly CUI, but the agency I work for did not label it that way? Am I still obligated to treat it as such? I will turn that to Nate or to Ashley.
My answer is always, if it's not labeled CUI and you think it is CUI, just go back up the supply chain. Who sent it to you? Ask them, hey, did you send this? Did you mean to send it? It looks like CUI. I think it's CUI. And especially if you're like far down in that supply chain, you're like 3 layers down from that prime. It's passed quite a few hands already. It's likely that maybe, you have to trust them, but always best to err on the side of caution. Just go back up and ask, and if they're like, oh yeah, you're right, maybe it is, then they would go back to their contract officer. Err on the side of caution always. But it's not your responsibility if it's not marked CUI, and that prime gave it to you, and they're saying it's fine. You wouldn't go back and yourself mark it CUI within your environment. You would just get confirmation that nope, you're good. It's not CUI.
Panelists, anyone else want to add to that?
So I do. And
right,
one
Lee.
of the things that we always have a concern with is building drawings on a military installation. Many times we would interpret those to be CUI just by their very nature of being critical infrastructure on the military installation. And I think that there is such a lack of just knowledge and training in the individuals who are responsible for marking them, because so much has been in flux on how CMMC is going to be implemented. And we changed from FOUO to CUI, and the markings are changed. I was on active duty when that was coming about, and trust me, it was extremely confusing for people that had used FOUO for decades. And so now that's going to be a problem, because when we have to push things down to subcontractors, who's a little flooring subcontractor whose scope of work may be $2,500.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, we are coming at the end of time. We do have more questions. Feel free to reach out to any of us on the panel today. We would love to try to get to your questions after the event today. We're all available on LinkedIn, and we want to thank you. I want to thank the panelists, Ashley, Lee, Chris, Nate. You guys were fantastic today. Thank you for being a part of this. And again, thanks to ENR for allowing us to have this conversation today about a topic that we feel is very, very important. On behalf of Kahua And everyone here, thank you all. Scott, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Please join me again in thanking our presenters, Nicholas Johnson, Chris Schwartz, Lee Powers, Ashley Lex, and Nate Mansfield, as well as our today's sponsor, Kahua. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to click the Email Us button on your console, and we'll share them with our presenters so they can respond directly to you, as Nicholas mentioned. If you don't have a chance to fill it out earlier, you will be redirected shortly to our post-event survey. We look forward to hearing from you about how we can make our programs work better for you. Please visit enr.com/webinars for the archive of this presentation to share with your colleagues, as well as information on our upcoming events. We hope you found today's discussion to be a good investment of your time. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.